Well, hello there. I'm Teresa Norton, and welcome to The View from Abroad. I'm the Broad, and this is the podcast that each week takes a look back at one of the columns I wrote for a Hong Kong newspaper between 1993 and 2000. And I got to tell you, sometimes looking back 30 years, some of the opinions I expressed feel kind of like watching old episodes of Friends. Like, I still think it's funny, but probably not very appropriate today. And some of the stuff feels like right on. And that's kind of the point of this, is to get a chance to look back and assess what's changed, and if it's me or if it's the world or if it's both. And I have a guest each week. And this week, my guest is Tobey Fitch, who I met. Well, maybe he and I can talk about where we met, but he's the managing director of Fitch Associates. It's a small strategic consulting and executive coaching firm. It's based in Menlo Park, California, and also in Portland, Oregon, where he will be dialing in from to talk with us today. Tobey helped Apple build its leadership development organization, Apple U, before starting his own firm. And he works with organizations including Adobe, T-Mobile, a lot of big tech companies that I'm sure you're familiar with. And he also works with nonprofit organizations. So look, before we talk to Tobey, let's listen to this week's column written about 30 years ago. The value of a lesson learned. I don't know, maybe I'm nuts, but then it is a mad, 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 mad world. Do you remember that movie? Milton Berle, Sid Caesar, and Ethel Merman. Jimmy Durante is a gangster who gets snuffed in front of this crazy bunch of people, and the movie stretches over miles of American highways and endless gags as these greed-crazed lunatics race to dig up the dead mobster's stolen loot. Money's a funny thing. Interesting to see what people who have it do with it, and what people will do to get it. There's a big battle being waged between the kids of a Hong Kong tycoon and their mother over his estate. Mom brought a medical team, bodyguards, and her lawyers to the funeral. It's a mad, 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 mad world. I used to think of my parents as being quite frugal. Actually, I probably thought they were really tight. I don't believe my mother ever bought a can of tuna fish that wasn't on special. She's a coupon clipper. In the United States, you get coupons which you redeem for discounts on items like Spam or fruit cocktail. They never offer coupons for Haagen-Dazs cappuccino ice cream bars. One of the few times I remember my dad getting angry with me was when I got in a food fight at school. Not because of the juvenile anarchy run amok with a cup of fruit cocktail, but because it was wasteful. My reaction was the same when my mother insisted that we buy imitation Levi's at JCPenney. The depression is over, Mom. This is just so, unfair. Why do I have to, suffer in wimpy jeans because the stock market crashed back in 1920-something or other? This is like the 1970s, man, and you and Dad better just, wake up and buy me some cool jeans, man. It wasn't as if my dad didn't have a job, for crying out loud. He wore a suit and tie to work. So what was with all this Spam? Why didn't they take some of the money they saved with the coupons and buy, a really hip car instead of that totally square station wagon we had for about 1,000,000 years? After I'd moved away from home, got a job, and started paying my own rent, my dad retired and flew my brother and I out to meet him and Mom in Hawaii for a family holiday. We traveled to all of the islands, stayed in amazing condos, rented a catamaran, and every morning ordered fresh fruit cocktails with big, fat chunks of real pineapple and guava and papaya, and we just tossed out what we didn't finish. My brother and I kept looking at each other like, when's the Spam coming out? But it never did. My dad, it turns out, is a generous man. I heard that when a little restaurant set up in a struggling neighborhood shopping mall, he went in just before they opened and, wishing the new owner luck, gave him a $20 bill to frame and put on the wall. He just wanted the guy to get off to a good start. I don't imagine my brother and I will get into any mudslinging, name-calling, hair-pulling rows over the family fortune. Our inheritance is Father's understanding that money is hard-earned for most people. It shouldn't be wasted or squandered on meaningless things. It should bring a smile to somebody's lips, or it ain't worth the paper it's printed on. I read something in the newspaper the other day that made me smile. I hope you'll forgive me if I make a gross generalization and say that my parents' frugality pales in comparison to the prudence demonstrated by most of my British friends. They do, after all, come from the country that paints a line on the glass to ensure a full pint is drawn. Here's a story. A butcher in Devon hid 840 pounds in the meat grinder. His dad came in the next morning and unknowingly turned on the machine, producing some of the most expensive sausages in history. It's only a small town, so everyone's having a good laugh about it, said the son. That's like almost 10,500 Hong Kong dollars. That amount could have justified a bit of name-calling, if not hair-pulling, in some families. But then, what's a good laugh going for on the open market these days? Tobey Fitch, come on down.
Well, hello.
Thank you so much for joining us from Portland, Oregon.
So nice to be here. So nice to be here with you across the world, and yet here in the same digital room with you.
Isn't that just extraordinary? Listen, I'm trying to think. I know that we met at one of those applied improv network events, but I can't remember where it was. But it was many moons ago.
I think this comes back to the topic that you're setting the theme up for your podcast series about which things from 30 years ago still seem like they're today, and which things seem like they're truly a long time ago. And hey, dear listener, if you are in fact under the age of 60, this is going to happen to you more and more when you're over the age of 60. But it was at some conference you and I can't figure out. Maybe San Francisco, maybe New York.
But anyway, you're here with me now.
Well, here we are.
We've just listened to this column, which, starts out talking about retro. I mean, it's a mad, 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 mad world. That movie had it was all vaudevillians practically. And Ethel Merman, gypsy. So that went back quite a ways. And the whole theme of it was greed, basically. They were all chasing that money. And it was a very funny show, but that sort of led to this whole idea about, this family that I was living in Hong Kong at the time that were battling over contested wills and fortunes and then looking at my parents who lived a very different and rather frugal life. What in there stood out to you as something that still stands up today? Does it? I mean, does it make sense?
Well, the part that stands up today and does make sense is your line, "Money's the funny thing." Interesting to see what people who have it do with it. Gosh, from popular culture to something about a recent presidential election in the United States. So many examples of that. So what stood out as being evergreen is money's not just a funny thing, but it triggers so many different reactions in different people.
Right.
But the key thing is, for sure, money's a funny thing.
Money is a funny thing. And, growing up, that whole idea of having, for me, Depression era parents, I don't know about you, but that was my folks. And my parents were older than everybody else's. My brother's 12 years older than I am. And I think my dad when he was in World War II, he was in his late 20s. So I had a much older father, right? And that whole notion of, not wasting things and being frugal and getting in trouble for being in a food fight, not for being like a little crazy anarchist, but because that was wasting food, right? So it was like a very different vibe.
Yeah, I could relate to that. I also had a Depression era mother. I had a mom who was a 40-year-old single mother once she had me, and raised me by herself and all that. And it was very hard to tell, by the way, in my own upbringing, whether I think I asked her once when I was in third grade, are we rich or are we poor? I don't understand. And it's because we had what the kids today now call social capital. Because my mom was such a community activist and person that she could, she could call the governor of the state of Washington or whatever and have a conversation. But we were literally scrounging our vegetables out of the bin where they threw away the scrap vegetables under the pretense of this is for our cow or our chickens. But that was
Right.
also like where that head of cabbage came from.
Yeah.
So, economically tight and born out of the depression, you had to take care of everything. But then, socially, intellectually, politically, in the middle of things.
Right. Well, listen, even just talking about this thing of, taking the discarded fruit and veg, there's a whole thing now where in the world they're saying, why are we only displaying the perfect lemons, oranges, and bananas? What happens to the misshapen bits? Right. So I
Yeah.
think maybe your mom was ahead of her time in just being, smart about using what's there. That's a very improv thing, isn't it?
There you go. Or like what the gleaners who would come around to the fields after the pretty fruit had been picked or what have you. Or the whole, like, it's like a company I think called Ugly Fruit or something that's specifically focused on the malformed pear. That's,
Ah,
also should be a children's story.
yeah. Well,
Um,
also a little bit like my shape and the image behind me by Sarah Bishop. I am a bit of a malformed pear, but that's information that nobody really needs to know. Um,
But dear listeners, what you may not be able to see is that behind Teresa's head, which is slightly distracting, is a woman of less than an hourglass figure, more like a wine glass stem, and then giant, gorgeous, rotund, and
Nether regions.
brassy buttocks. Yes, it's
Yes.
quite a thing. Yeah.
I love that
Wow.
picture. And I asked Sarah Bishop, the artist, I bought that when I was in Hong Kong and I just loved it. And I asked her if it was okay if I used that as sort of a little bit of a backdrop for the show. And she said, absolutely. So I'm really happy to give her a plug. She's a wonderful artist. So anyway, yeah, back to this whole thing. When I listened to that column again, uh, the thing that stands out, um, I think the only thing that probably would have bothered my father was me talking about him being generous and, putting a
Uh,
$20 bill up in the local store. He's the opposite of me, Toby. I'm one of those people. He's like the guy who was the guy. He passed away a number of years ago at like 100. Um, he was the guy who didn't want to bring any attention to himself, would do something nice and not tell anybody. For me, it's like, why would you do that? What's the point of doing something nice if everybody's not going to know about it? I like to think that the reason I say that is because I think I should be setting a good example for the world. I'm being like
yeah.
Jesus. But actually, no, it's just because I want the credit and the brownie points.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just that. Um, any thoughts on the idea of being generous these days?
Uh,
Where does that fall
yeah.
into the world
A,
today?
a lot of them. Well, it falls into be essentially tied into the whole conversation about money and frugality. I mean, two things I noticed in that last little bit we were talking about. One is, yeah, there's generational aspects, like people who, like us, had people as parents who'd survived the depression, and for them, saving every penny mattered. And we'll talk later about, your dad's response to it in later life, which shocked you, of then spending money. Um, it's highly unusual. I actually helped start a socially responsible investment company where we studied a lot of people's behaviors and beliefs around money. And most people, that they lock those patterns in and they don't change them. In recent times, I've been trying to coach parents of friends who now have a lot of money. Okay, boomer. They were boomers. They have lots of money, but they won't spend like on their healthcare, or they've got a broken down crappy car. And it's like,
That's dangerous. Yeah.
that's danger. And this person's like, you're 78. There's, you could, if you live to be 120, you're not going to spend all this money, and you could still be generous in the world. Like,
Yeah.
get a better used car. But
Yeah.
the mindset is so locked in, right? I
And then
think
I've
also,
also got friends on the other end of the spectrum who just have no concept of saving anything. It's you got money, you spend it, and not thinking about, yeah.
Right. I mean, in a way, I think dare I critique you ever from 30 years ago uh, for burying the lead? But again, for me, like the value of a lesson learned, great title, I liked it. But money is a funny thing. Feels like
That should have been the
more
title.
more what it's all about. Yeah, I've got people now. Well, it's so on the topic of when you do a good deed, do you are you public about it or not? In the last 2 years, weirdly enough, I found myself in a position where two different people I knew since my grade school days and had kept in touch with, because I'm that guy who keeps in touch with people, I kind of realized were on the edge of homelessness. One through medical crisis,
Mm,
and another through a business crisis. In both cases, no fault of their own, bad circumstance, not enough of a buffer in the bank, etc. Is an amazing object lesson on how many people are indeed that close. You get a few surprise bills, something goes wrong with your health, you burn through your savings, bang. And I was able to take steps to either get other people's money involved or use a little bit of the money I have, which is not that much, and keep house them, make sure they're okay, and
right.
reset. Um, and so obviously, I mention it here. I would never mention their names. I don't want specific credit because that would be a violation of their privacy. But it's certainly whether I talk about it. I tell my closest friends, "Here's the thing I did recently," and it's not something I think
Okay.
I'd be doing.
Let me
That's
ask
the
you
thing.
something like with
Yes. Yeah.
crowdfunding, right? For somebody
Yeah.
who's been through a difficult time. They always say, do you want your name on there or do you not want your name on there?
Yeah. There's a good cause, and do you make it anonymous and put your name in? I put my name in and I share it because I want people to know. Look, I think this is worthwhile. Me personally, right? Jump in. Or if
Me
you know me
too.
randomly, I went in on this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think
It's not just the
uh
person's family who's stepping up here. It's friends and maybe somebody who knows us might say, "Oh, well, maybe I should chip in too." I don't know. I didn't want to
right.
go too far down that road, but I'm just trying to make myself feel better about putting my name on that.
I want you to feel better, Teresa. Go ahead and put your name in and feel
I'll
better.
tell you something. I will never, if I get fabulously wealthy, I can guarantee you I will never be that anonymous donor of a wing to a hospital. You will
Mm.
definitely know you are in the Teresa Norton wing of
Well,
whatever hospital.
okay. On that, I just thought about this yesterday because I was at some gathering of absurdly wealthy people and medical professionals a few months back, and there was sort of a joke around of like when there's a lineup of ambulances at the ER. Uh, this is one wealth advisor telling their extremely wealthy client, when they're going to pull the ambulance up to a wing that has your name on it, odds are you'll be first.
Oh, get you in the door.
Right. And it just never crossed my mind. I've seen that, so and so, whatever Mark Zuckerberg wing of the hospital. But the
They're
very
not going to
logistic
leave him at
fact
the
that
end of the queue.
it's like it's a better health insurance policy is if you can buy a whole wing of a hospital, that's the platinum plan.
Okay, listen,
Exactly.
it's time for us to take a little break. Oh, so nice.
Oh,
So
so
sweet, Becky
nice.
Tara. Oh, so nice. On the subject of oh, so nice, tell us a little bit about the dinner party, please.
About the dinner party. Thank you, Walter Jebby, for that lead in. So the dinner party, we've each been to dinner parties. Some of us have been to potluck meals. Usually it's a way where people come together and they become closer friends. The idea of bringing a dish, sharing a food, this goes back millennia in our culture. And what happened was about 14 years ago, a couple of young women, each of whom had lost their mothers, and they're in their 20s, and they were struck by how, A, none of their friends could relate or understand, and they felt just terribly alone. They're off in college, right, away from their communities, and I believe they found each other and they decided to start having a meal together, and they found some other people and brought them together, and they said, "This is so helpful. to have this once a month dinner where we come together and we just talk about how we're doing. But what we know for a fact is everybody else at the table knows what we're talking about.
Mm.
Instead of those kind of like, oh, I hope you get healing. Oh, I hope you get closure, right? Oh, how are you doing? Which only people who haven't recently lost someone, or anyone ever, say those things. So the point is, A, people who haven't been through it don't know what to say, and it would
Right,
be a harder
exactly.
exercise to train the entire populace. So instead, their focus was, um, let's use some simple technology, like a website that allows people to come in, tell us a bit about themselves and where they live. Um, they actually have people, accommodation staff and volunteers who will then call those people up who've applied to join a table. And it's across the US, but they're in a few other countries as well. I think there's some operations in Canada and some in Europe. Um, and so basically you get hold of them, you apply to join a table, you describe a bit about your situation. They have someone talk with you a bit about how you're doing. Could you come in this area to this zip code or this address once a month? Someone agrees to be a host, which just means have it at their place or find a restaurant, but mostly have it at their place, and to bring a dish. And it ranges from kind of random collections of people where they've just lost somebody, and it might be someone might be a sibling or a mother or father, aunt and uncle, close friend, to very specific groups. Like I think there's a group in Seattle they put together that was just for women who have lost wives
Right.
and the unique situation of being gay and losing somebody. And what is really cool is the model. I come out of tech. I like things that can uh, grow quickly and scale. They're not dependent on having a therapist. They've got good therapist informed guidance and materials at their website. Um, and they just sort of do some coaching with the hosts and they give people sort of some discussion guides. But the premise is bring a dish and talk about
How
who
you're
brought
doing.
you, meaning, well,
Yeah.
who brought you, meaning who died,
Yeah.
and how you doing. And the thing I'll say, Teresa, about this for me, that why it matters so much personally is because 10 years ago this spring, we lost our son Sam
Yeah.
at 22 in a motorcycle accident, about to graduate college. His sister at that moment was 18 and in the week of choosing her college and doing all those things. And uh, after a couple of years of being away at college, she decided, besides talking to her close friends who were awesome in support, she wanted to maybe talk to some other folks. And a friend of hers happened to know about one of these dinner party groups, brought her along. It happened to be a session where one of the two young women founders were there. And my daughter, Aggie, uh, decided I'd like to volunteer and then go to work for them. And then, full confession, why else do I support this organization? She's now their, senior director of communications and all that stuff.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of the people in my life who have either lost a brother, a sister, a child, a parent. Yeah. So this is primarily focused at young adults. I think before we talked earlier and you said it's between the age of like 20 to 40, right? That's sort of
That's
generally
their
the
ideal
window.
group.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
it's www.thedinnerparty.org. I have looked at the website. It is very inspiring. I really encourage everybody to go have a look. There is an option to donate and there's the option to think about who in your circle might benefit from knowing about this.
Right.
www.thedinnerparty.org. Thank you so much, Tobey, for sharing that with us. I always ask the guest, can you please tell me what is the word or the idea that catapulted a memory from your own life, something that happened during your salad days? And Tobey, it's over to you. The ping pong ball is on
Yes.
your side of the net.
Oh, Teresa, thank you. I hope it's not like that Olympic level of ping pong play, but I'm going to work to whack it right back to you. So many things came out of this column. I just think of the eight 8.5 million columns you wrote in your time there. This is one of the best ones. One thing that triggered me was uh, the comment about fruit cocktail and getting in a food fight at school and your dad being so upset, not because of juvenile anarchy, thank goodness, because you've become an adult anarchist, um, but of running amok with a cup of fruit cocktail because it was wasteful. And your next line is what grabbed me. He said, my reaction was the same as when my mother insisted we buy imitation Levi's at J.C. Penney. For those of you who are under our age, that was a store. Um, the immediate thing that came to mind when you said imitation Levi's at J.C. Penney was, even in our relative impoverishment when I was a child, my mom would try to, sometimes like get me something nice,
Mm,
right? 'Cause she
mm.
loved me dearly. She took good care of me, spoiled me in her own ways. And at the time, the craze was, and this had to have been like fifth grade or sixth grade, maybe
You're a
middle
bit younger
school.
than I am. I'm 68. I think you're just in your late 50s. Is that right?
Think of it that way. It's appreciate that. That's because you and I have crushes on each other. No, I'm up to 64 now, so
Oh, okay.
I look a tender
Yes, it's whatever you're
53.
washing your face with. We should all
Thanks,
order a case. Okay, carry on.
thanks so much. Yeah. Um, but you know how that like now the kind of hip courant boot like in Brooklyn is the Timberland boot, right? And everybody
Mm.
wears them, and that's cool. But at the time, there were just other boots, but it had that what is called waffle stomper sole.
Oh,
So it
yeah.
was that boot with the kind of a waffle pattern.
Yes.
And I think Timberland uses the same pattern in the boot, but the sole pattern was so important. And for whatever reason, as it is with kids, right, you were hyper conscious of the sole pattern on the boots as summer turned to fall, and that there were these right kind of boots to get. And I don't remember what the brand was, but I knew what the sole looked like. And I had probably been talking about these things. And mom said, we're going to get you some new boots. Great. Here's the opportunity. And we go in, and of course, those boots were far too expensive, and I got the J.C. Penney Levi's version of boots, and she, I think she actually wrapped them. I thought I was getting, this was the, bait and switch with the Depression era mom. I
Right.
thought because we'd shopped that I clearly pointed out and tried on the very cool and objectively much nicer boots. But when it came time to open the parcel on Christmas Day, it was
Oh,
the imitation
you said,
boots that
thanks so much. It's just what I
I think,
wanted.
nah, well, you might have thought so, but no. I always called my mother Marion. I never called her mom. We had
Oh,
this. It was
really?
just she and I in the household.
Yeah.
I loved her dearly, but also, um, yes, I think I said something loving in the equivalent. Damn it, Marion! Like these are not waffle stompers. Yeah,
How old were you, if it's all right for me to ask, how old were you when your mom passed away?
you can ask it, but then I have to use math, and that's a big problem.
Oh,
My mother, Marion, died in 2008, which I can't do the math.
okay.
I was 48.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, and lived a long. I mean, she lived to 88. Uh, she had moved to this small island near Seattle called Vashon Island, where she raised me. My mother moved after being starting off as a labor organizer in the 30s in Seattle,
Mm.
waitresses and lumbermen at a time when labor organizers and union organizers got shot, uh, to being a Rosie the Riveter, Todd Shipyard's World War II, um, to moving to this island, Vashon, near Seattle, with her girlfriend from college to edit and produce the local weekly newspaper together. But the other piece about your dad that I'm just related to, not your mom on the imitation Levi's. I don't know. Like for those of you listening who are parents, it is easy to feel like whatever you do is lost upon your children. Like it often feels like, how do we raise children right? What do we do? What's the right thing? And at a higher level, what I take from your story is just the value of trying to live your values,
Mm.
whatever they are, and how incredulous your children are about them. Uh, Both your parents live their values, the values around money. Um, and can we unpack this one level further, and I know we
Yeah.
have this limited time, but I think it's become really important to me and become sort of a an aspect of a sense of personal mission in life for me is helping to destigmatize both money and death. And I think I was focused on destigmatizing death before my son died, but then afterwards, it's like, yeah, we need to talk about this because, hey, spoiler alert, we all die. Um, but also destigmatizing money because there's so much wrapped up around it. And I realized one of the biggest gifts my mother gave me was she did not stigmatize it. She had five little rental houses. Often her tenants were in crisis. She viewed her role as offering lower price rentals, uh, which often meant they'd been repaired by me as a 10-year-old.
Mm.
Um, but she would realize they were struggling. And she would not ask them, "Can we talk about your money?" She would just sit down and go, "Let's go through your finances." And she would pull out the back of an envelope and she'd say, just like, "What? No, you're spending too much on this. Do this, do this. No, did you know there's this program you can do? No."
And that's a gift from your mother to you.
It directly to me.
Yeah.
Can I throw one last little thing in that this
Oh,
sparked for
my
me?
dear, of course you can.
Back of envelopes and taco conversations are the two things I want to touch on. Back of envelopes was, I do remember my mom, I might have been because I asked her, or it might not have been, just one day sitting down at the kitchen table and she just like flips over this envelope that's on the table. And God knows, people, the mail you get right now, to the extent you get mail, you don't want to read it anyway because who even knows what it's from, but use the back of the envelope because it's handy scratch paper. Um, and she just started sketching out, here's the income that we get, here's what things cost, da 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 da, here's how this works. And I know so many kids who don't have any idea what budget seems intimidating, but my mom would just, sketch it out in the back of a piece of paper. That sound effect in the background, people,
And the
is
taco?
me. Yeah, that's me impersonating writing on a piece of paper.
Oh, oh.
The taco conversation is as we each plan for our own financial futures and we have kids who are becoming adults. Um, A, do some financial planning, spend a couple $100 with a financial planner to talk about, am I really okay? Because that's important. We did that. A couple months after that, we were sitting down for dinner in a little town in Mexico with our daughter and our future son-in-law. And the little funky taco joint had a bewilderingly huge menu of taco options, like the biggest I'd ever seen. This they hadn't spent money finishing the sheetrock or the concrete in the restaurant, but they had spent money on a, I kid you not, 6 foot high and 20 foot wide vinyl sign with 400 varieties of Mexican food none of us had heard of, and we'd been there a lot. Like, oh my God, what do we do? How do we handle this? And so there's 10 minutes of horse trading about what could be ordered and what to do about this or that and the other thing. Pause, order goes in. We look at each other and I said, "Hey, I just realized it's our last night together, the four of us, before we all fly back to different places. And I just wonder if there's any conversations we should have while we're together that we would, if we get home, we'd wish we'd had when we were all sitting down around a table together." And my daughter said, "Well, actually, you said a couple months ago you guys were doing long-term financial planning, and you said you'd be open to helping us in some way buy a place for ourselves to live. And I'd like to explore that further." I said, "Great, we've just done this financial planning. I'd like to talk about that." And I could see, her fiance,
Partner.
partner, and we've already told him he's part of our conversation, he's part of our family, et cetera. But you could see his shoulders like just rise up a quarter of an inch because I know his family hasn't always had the most open relationship talking about money intergenerationally. And I said, "Look, this can be uptight for people and hard and difficult to talk about. And we're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about death. We're going to talk about all this stuff in the next 15 minutes, half an hour. You know the conversation we just had about tacos? You remember how we talked about all those choices, but it didn't have any emotional weight? What if we talk about family finances, life and death, and inheritance planning as if it were just tacos? Let's just make it a taco conversation, but it's about money and life and you getting your inheritance before we die." And we had the great conversation. It was lovely. He said, "That's wonderful. This is helps me think about how to talk to my parents about this." I didn't quite understand what he meant until 3 months later. We're in New York, sitting down to dinner with his parents, just the four of us, because we love them. We have a great relationship. We're just catching up, sitting down, catching up. How's it going? How's it going? And his dad says, "Wait, wait, 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 wait. Before we start talking about little things, I understand when you were in Mexico, you had a taco conversation." Terry and
I
I both said, we, we did. And he said, I want the four of us to have a taco conversation. And
look
it
at
just
this.
opened up this whole playing field about how do you support your kids and at what level and what seems reasonable and and it was just lovely. Anyway,
Tobey Fitch,
taco conversations.
listen, what have you, the gifts you have given me in this, all of us in this conversation. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here with me today. And I'm looking forward to reminding people about www.thedinnerparty.org. Think about not just for yourself, but for people that you know who may not need it now, but might need it later. And also, maybe it's something that would be lovely to have happen in your part of the world. Thank you, Tobey. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. See you next time. And remember, breathe all the time. Come up slowly, because as my dear friend Geraldine says to me, hey, what if it's good?